Hey everyone, I had a little production schedule change with the podcast that was originally scheduled for today. So instead, I'm going to be bringing you a rebroadcast of a past episode. Why? Well, I want to have this guest back on the show to talk about his book that I've just started reading. And so I think it's a good prep given how much the show has grown since I first had Ben on. So today, I'm going to rebroadcast episode 62 with Ben Shneiderman, as it's been a few years, and Ben has been talking about the importance of design for AI for much longer than many. Ben is a distinguished professor at the University of Maryland in the Computer Science Department and has been researching and writing about design and human-computer interaction for quite a long time. Additionally, since episode 62 was published, Ben's book, Human-Centered AI, is now out, and I finally started reading it. And I'm really hoping to have Ben back on the show to do a follow-up, given how much the AI landscape has changed even since his book was released. On a personal note, as a consulting product designer that's specialized in AI and analytical data products, I'm always looking for insightful information, and Ben always has a wealth of perspective to share. To me, successful design for AI means we're always looking to balance the needs of customers and users, the business or sponsoring organization of the product that we're creating, and the ecosystem of third parties, including those affected by the products that we make. This is hard enough, not to mention the ongoing challenges with data privacy, governmental policy, ethics, and things like model explainability and interpretability. And when you add on the advancements of Gen AI, which seem to be coming out once a week, there's a new drop of some sort. It's a lot to stay on top of for any modern product team. And one final note for this audience in this moment of designing AI, a thought leader in UX who I've had on the show before recently told me in a LinkedIn post comment that AI means Gen AI to everyone else. So when you hear the general public talking about AI, they are referring to Gen AI. Other forms of AI are called by what they functionally do. So a sales predictor or a product recommender or a retirement planning calculator. I thought that was a really interesting observation and just wanted to share that with you. And I know with this audience of data product leaders, and we have a lot of data scientists and data professionals that listen to the show, I was kind of curious to know what your observations are and whether or not you agree with that. When I heard this perspective, I kind of stepped back a little bit and I was like, I think he's right. I do think that's how the general public sees this, because we don't think of things like routing algorithms and Google Maps or Waze. We don't really tend to think about the machine learning or the neural nets and what the technology is behind that. So what does it mean? I don't know. I'm curious to know what you think, though. Just wanted to share that with you. So if you'd like to drop me a comment, feel free to do that via email, brian@designingforanalytics.com, or leave an audio comment right on the podcast webpage at designingforanalytics.com/podcast. That'll come right to me. And if I get a bunch of these responses from you, maybe I will share those with you all in a future episode. So anyhow, you can keep up with Ben's writing on AI, policy, user experience design, and the commentary of others that are in this field via his HCAI Google group, to which I am a subscriber myself. So until then, here's my replay of episode 62. This is back from April 2021 with Ben Shneiderman, author of Human-Centered AI.
Hi, my name is Ben Shneiderman, and you're listening to Experiencing Data with Brian T. O'Neill.
Experiencing Data explores how product managers, analytics leaders, data scientists, and executives are looking at design and user experience as a way to make their custom enterprise data products and analytics applications more useful, usable, and valuable. And now, here's your host, the founder and principal of Designing for Analytics, Brian O'Neill.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Brian T. O'Neill. You're listening to Experiencing Data. Today, I'm really happy to talk about human-centered design and its impact on artificial intelligence and how these disciplines are working together. I recently attended a webinar by the People-Centered Internet Coalition, I believe it's called, and Ben Shneiderman from the University of Maryland, who is a professor of computer science there, was presenting a talk, and he's actually writing a book on HCAI, as he refers to it. So we're going to unpack what HCAI is. Ben, tell us who you are, though, and why are we talking about AI now in the design world, and why are you writing this book right now?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for the chance. This has become a big passion for me So I'm glad to talk about this. Yes, my background's from human-computer interaction, user interface design, user experience design from the world of computer science. I became 20% of an experimental psychologist in trying to study the way people use computers. And that's become my calling card in life. My book, Designing the User Interface, is now in 6th edition to tell the heroic story of how this small group of researchers changed the world by making websites that you could use, graphical user interfaces, and mobile devices that really work, that 2 billion people have in their pockets to connect up with the world, to do business, to get medical care, and so on. So it's from that world that we're building out and learning some new lessons and putting the old ones to work. The world of AI has certainly grown and blossomed, and it's the hot topic everywhere you go. It's the hot topic in businesses around the world and in governments, and governments are launching agencies to monitor AI and making regulatory moves and making rules. The European GDPR is changing the way things happen. People want explainable AI. They want responsible AI. They want safe, reliable, trustworthy AI. They want a lot of things, but they're not always sure how to get them. And the world of human-computer interaction has a long history of giving people what they want and what they need. And so that blending seems like a natural way for AI to grow and to accommodate the needs of real people who have real problems. And not only the methods for studying the users, but the rules, the principles, the guidelines for making it happen. So that's where the action is. Now, of course, what we really want from AI is to make our world a better place. And that's a tall order. But we start by talking about the things that matter, the human values, the rights, the human rights, the access to justice and the dignity of every person. We want to support individual goals, their sense of self-efficacy. They can do what they need to in the world, their creativity, their responsibility, and their social connections. They want to reach out to people. So those are the sort of high aspirational goals. And then below that becomes the hard work of how do we build that? And that's where we want to go.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on some of that. I'm particularly curious, though. I think the leap for some of the audience that's probably listening to this show and people that are CDOs, CAOs, leaders of data science teams, analytics teams, these people are frontline workers when it comes to building out the models, and the models eventually become aspects of the engineering, which then yields an interface and an experience, which is there whether it's done with intent or not. It's everyone's a designer, whether you know it or not. So how is it that a data science organization or an analytics team or someone that's very close to the actual model development makes the leap to say, oh, I need user experience or design help or someone with human factors knowledge? How is this going to help me out? I like that gluing those two things together is not a natural thing, I think, for many data people. So can you help unpack why do I need that?
Right on. Sure. The business analysts, the designers, the developers, the implementers, the software engineers, the data managers, those are the people who are going to have to make the real tough decisions. They're going to have to bridge the gap between the ethics that we all want. We want responsible, humane, and wonderful AI. And we have then the gap, though, to the practitioner. What does the practitioner do in order to make a reliable, safe, and trustworthy system? And then how do they know if they've really done it? How do we assess the performance? So there's a set of approaches to this. There are 15 recommendations that I put together in this paper that was published early, it was last year now. And those things have 3 levels. One is the level of the teams, the software engineering teams. And they've got real work to do. They need the right kind of workflows and engineering patterns, the agile development methods that will work for AI. The AI world is different because it's not just programming, but it also involves the use of data that's used for training. So the key distinction is that the data that drives the AI has to be the appropriate data. It has to be unbiased. It has to be fair. It has to be appropriate to the task at hand. And many people and many companies are coming to grips with how to manage that. Of course, if you're going to, this has become controversial, let's say, in issues like granting parole or mortgages or hiring people, and the controversies that Amazon ran into when its hiring algorithm favored men rather than women certainly caused a lot of trouble. The bias that's occurred in facial recognition algorithms, which were less accurate with people of color than it were with light-skinned people. And that's led to some real problems in the real world. And that's where we have to make sure we do a much better job. And the tools of HCI are very effective in building these better systems, in testing and evaluating them. Okay, so let's say you've got the right data for the right task. You've also got to have the right algorithm. And you've really got to build the system and then assess and test it, validate and verify. So the methods for doing that are a rich set of possibilities. We're growing that. We're shaping it for the needs of AI and the complexity whereby the algorithms have to be reassessed, sometimes daily, because the training data has changed, because the context of use has changed. And so when the world is changing in a way that's maybe unpredictable, we have to really be much more careful. And especially when we're dealing with applications that Kathy O'Neill, maybe a relationship of yours, her excellent book called Weapons of Math Destruction. She talks about opaque, scalable, and harmful. Those are the three things. If you can't understand the algorithm, if it potentially causes harm, and if it's widely implemented, then we better pay attention. So if there's a startup company with a new application or a researcher, fine, let them do their thing. But if it's, if Bank of America is rolling out a new mortgage granting system, then we have to focus attention and make sure that it's done right because people's lives are changed. Transportation systems, medical systems, military systems, all these are what I would call consequential or life-critical applications. And when you're dealing with those, it's not okay to be 95% correct. You have to be much higher than that. So there are lightweight applications like recommenders for films, books, restaurants, or, et cetera, where, okay, if it's 95% okay, that's all right. And if 5% of the recommendations are a little strange, well, that might be fun and interesting. It's okay. But I go back, where the real importance is in the case of consequential and life-critical applications. So we got one level, which is the software engineering design. And within that, there's two more big issues I want to mention. One is the idea of audit trails. It's an easy thing to do. It's what civil aviation has built as a way of making safety. And we need that for self-driving cars. We need that for every robot. A flight data recorder for every robot is what I'm talking about. Financial systems and trading systems already do that, so scale is possible. And we have to decide on how we're going to have medical devices track their history, record them, report them, have an audit trail. So if something goes wrong, we can go back retrospectively and analyze what happened. Audit trails are an easy, simple, maybe I shouldn't say easy, but it requires some thinking, but that's something every automated consequential system should be doing. The second important thing the software engineers and the designers need to do is explainability. Every user needs to be able to say, why did that happen? And get an answer in which they understand, or they understand it enough to say, that's not fair. I want to complain. I want to review. I want to evaluate, or I'm talking to my lawyer. I've been treated unfairly. I haven't been granted the parole I deserve. I haven't been given the job or the raise I deserve. So we are talking about consequential important systems here, and therefore we need to build in the mechanisms by which users understand what's happening. So those are 5 of the principles for software engineering teams. For business leaders, corporate leaders, building a culture of safety is becoming the right idea. It's not a matter of just saying, yeah, we want safe systems, but it's actually doing it, hiring the right people, allocating the resources, doing the training, building the environment, reporting the near misses, and reporting the failures. Incident reports are a big deal. Incident reports for the near misses and for the failures. And that's a long history of successful things in aviation. Certainly we've got that. But the Food and Drug Administration's got its adverse drug event reporting system open to the public, to clinicians, to pharmacists, to others, where they report problems that patients are having with certain medications. And from that comes a better understanding. We need that. So the Partnership on AI has put up an AI incident database. Take a look at it. It's got more than 1,000 reports about systems that have failed. There's lessons to be learned from those and valuable ideas about what could be done to make systems still better. So the incident reporting is part of the safety culture, and the near misses are as important as the failures. The near misses give you the clues to what's going wrong. There's usually a lot more near misses than there are failures. And the good news is sometimes people have avoided near misses turning into failures. And that's what you want to learn from too. So near misses give you hero stories of pilots that saved a failing plane, not just the ones that crashed it. So there's a set of things in the level of organizational design that I call the safety culture. Above that and outside, we're going to look for the formats of independent oversight, whereby the work of companies who are building consequential and life-critical systems get reviewed by insurance companies, by accounting firms, by professional societies, by standards bodies. There's a lot of organizations that are interested, and the winning systems will be those that are open and transparent, that can be reviewed, evaluated, and discussed in an open way, in an adversarial way. It's like zoning boards. We're going to move towards the notion of a zoning board where if you want to build a house, you appear before the zoning board, or you want to build an office or a commercial building, and you say, here's my plan. And the zoning board says, well, that looks pretty good. Looks like you've adhered to the 30,000 pages of the building code, and you've done a good job, but there's a few things that your neighbors are complaining about. And, here are the changes we want you to make, and you'll do that. And then you come to some agreement, we hope, and you get a permit to build. You build it, and then the inspector comes and gives you a certificate of occupancy, and then your insurance company says, okay, we'll insure it. So there's those kind of mechanisms of zoning boards, and then continuous review like the Food and Drug Administration does for pharmaceutical production and for food production, meat packing, and so on. And the Federal Reserve Board does for banking systems, just to make sure things get handled in a fair and equitable way. And then, of course, we have the failures. When the serious consequential failures, you want to open review. Here, the National Transportation Safety Board's our favorite example. They fly in when a plane crashes or a train or a boat, and they investigate. They're respected. Their reports give guidance as to what to do, and they have teeth, and it has impact. And they're respected as an independent oversight board, and that's what we want. Every company will tell you, we do a really good job in checking out our AI systems. That's great. We want every company to do a really good job, but we also want an independent oversight of somebody who's outside the company, who knows the field, who's looked at systems at other companies and can bring ideas and bring understanding of the dangers as well, because these systems operate in an adversarial environment where there are malicious actors out there who are causing trouble. And you need to understand what the dangers are, what the threats are to the use of your system. You need to understand where the biases come from, what the dangers are there, and where the software has failed in other places. You may know what happens in your company, but you can benefit by learning what happens outside your company. And that's where independent oversight from accounting companies, from government regulators, and from other independent groups is so valuable. So that's the level structure for bridging the gap between ethics and practice.
I do get that, but for teams that are doing, they're trying to do applied work. Let's say that the outputs, the software, the solutions, the predictive models, whatever it may be, actually services partners or internal employees, other departments. We're trying to help the marketing department with spend. We're trying to build a pricing algorithm for the sales team to use. Does this framework change if the AI is not being experienced by, quote, a paying customer or even a third party who doesn't intend to be part of it, but is being affected by that, like a camera using facial rec in a public space, and I don't have any relationship with that company that's powering that? I do get all of that. Does this formula change if we're talking about applying this work internally? Data as a strategic asset, let's take this equipment. We want to predict when the hardware that our company makes is going to fail before it does, send a replacement out at this hospital so they never have downtime with that x-ray machine. It is always working, but we need telemetry about it. Maybe there's somewhat sensitive information in that. Like, how much of that data can we capture? Should we be building models on this? Does some of this have to change if we don't really expose the AI or the machine learning algorithms?
No, you've got the right idea. Kathy O'Neill's guidance gives us a good clue. Opacity is one danger, but the ones you're talking about are scale and harm. If it's a small scale thing and there's no harm to others, if there's only internal dangers, that's probably okay. You were at the edge of it when you said a medical device. If the x-ray machine is going to kill somebody, then I'm worried about it. But if it's a maintenance device on a plumbing fixture, then you're okay. You don't need to do that. That's a different rule. The internal use is very clearly what you're talking about, where we're not talking about harms to others.
I guess in my experience, though, there's a tremendous amount of waste even there. And this isn't so much that the models and solutions aren't ethical or whatever. Most of it's, we built a model in isolation. It was the deployment of the model was not thought of as part of the solution the way I think a designer we would think holistically about. It has to include the last mile user experience piece within the design of the whole thing. Otherwise, you just build a little component that sits on a shelf, but until it goes out into the business, it's not doing any good. So I feel like there's even an earlier gap that needs to be solved, even for the teams just trying to leverage this stuff internally. Like the 101 stuff is still missing there. And I'm curious if you think the 101 design practice, the 101 standards of design apply to this space, or whether it's a different default set of learning that data professionals need to know about design when it comes to working with artificial intelligence. Is it different, or is it mostly about the same fundamentals with a little bit of extra stuff when we're using this capability?
You're getting to important points here. I like this. I'd say, the basic principle is to think about the control panel. What does the user interface look like? And then that forces you to ask the question, who's the user? Who is operating this device? There's no such thing as an autonomous device. Every device is really someone owns it. Somebody's responsible. Someone starts it, someone stops it, someone fixes it. Someone notices when it's performing poorly. If that's not true, then your organization's in deeper trouble. I mean, responsibility is a pretty key factor here. So if there's something going on, if a manager is deciding to use some AI system, what they need is a control panel to let them know what's happening, what's it doing, what's going wrong, and what's going right. And so, that kind of supervisory autonomy is what I talk about, not full machine autonomy that's hidden away that you never see it, because that's you just, head in the sand kind of thinking. What you want to do is expose the operation of a system and, where possible, give the stakeholders who are responsible for performance the right kind of control panel and the right kind of data. The feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. And companies know that they want to be able to measure the success stories, and they want to know their failures so they can reduce them. The continuous improvement mantra is alive and well. We do want to keep tracking what's going on and make sure it gets better every quarter.
Have you seen before after examples of teams that may not have been practicing any sort of intentional design or user experience or human factors, recipes, activities, behaviors in the work that they do, and then maybe later they started to use some of these and saw a change in the work that they did? And I don't just mean like rescuing yourself from a public relations disaster because a model went south and you got on the front page of the Times, but something where business value increased, customer satisfaction increased, some other metric besides kind of the headline AI situations that we often hear about.
Sure. The headline stories, would be, and the transformative ones were things like the early days of airbag deployments in cars. They were great. They saved 2,500 lives a year. But in the early days, they killed about 100 babies and elders because of inadvertent deployments. And only when the data began to be collected through emergency rooms, it took a long time because nobody was thinking about that it could be bad. Not nobody, but not enough people. And only when the data collected did those, inadvertent deaths get changed. And so you built in a sensor in the passenger seat and you moved the baby into the back seat. So all those changes are really things that made a difference. And the other sort of headline one was the 737 MAX, of course, and its crashes. And that took two very painful, tragic, deadly crashes to reset the user interface. Remember, Boeing's mistake was that there was no user interface. The MCAS system was hidden from the pilots. They were not even informed that it was in place. And so they didn't think of turning it off because they just didn't know what was going on. So those kind of things are the headline grabbers. But every e-commerce company is working, with this kind of testing. The idea of A/B testing is something that happens hundreds of times, weekly at Microsoft and Amazon and everywhere else. And so they will run tests. Does having a bigger picture of a book sell more books or not? And so you give 10,000 users a page with bigger book pictures, and you give 10,000 users a page with the normal ones. You wait 2 weeks and you see who sells more books. Is it better to have more space for the textual description or better to have more space for the image of the book? So those kind of things, those small focused decisions that you were talking about, those are happening, on a regular basis for leading companies that understand that feedback is the breakfast of champions, that they need to know what's working and they need to try different things. So there's three ways of trying things. A/B testing is a popular commercial approach. Usability testing is another way. I just dealt with a interesting case about starting January 1st of this year. The U.S. government requires hospitals, the 6,000 hospitals in the U.S., to post their estimated price for 300 common procedures. And this journalist was looking for, did they do a good job in making it accessible? And we looked at dozens of hospital websites, and some did a great job putting it right up front in a readable way on top and, in a meaningful way with language you could understand. And others hid it way down on the bottom. And when you clicked on it, you got this very strange kind of list of
procedure codes
and abbreviations that were really tough to make sense of. And you had to click and click and click to get anything done. And then even then you weren't sure what the price would be. So that's not an easy task, I have to say, but it's exactly the issue you're talking about, that if you want to make a procedure that's effective, you're going to evaluate and see how well it works. So A/B testing in the real world, usability testing, a dozen users, give them a dozen tasks for an hour and see how many of them get it done and what goes wrong, and then write a report about what the problems were and what worked and what needs to be improved. So that's kind of the basic work of usability research in a practitioner environment. The academic, the third testing method would be the academic approach of controlled experiments, where you give 20 users one version and 20 users another version. You got your stopwatch and you measure how many seconds it takes for them to do each of the dozen tasks. And then you look for statistically significant differences in completion times or error rates, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole world of research about that, but there's a much bigger world of professional practitioner design and experience people who are working and doing great jobs in a lot of companies. Not everywhere, but as time goes by, more and more companies are understanding the value, the power, the importance, the effect of good user experience design.
Mm-hmm. To state something kind of against this, and maybe this is just the fact of learning, but if we look at some of the issues with Google, if you know about some of the hiring issues that have gone on there in the AI research area, Facebook with elections, and it's the way the algorithms tend to become echo chambers there. These companies also are, and this is not through heavy research, but probably have the heaviest investment of user experience professionals within data science organizations. They have UX, ML UX people, UX for AI people. They're kind of at the cutting edge where I see a lot more generalist designers and most other companies. Most of them are rather unfamiliar with any of this or what the ramifications are on the design work that they're doing. But even these largest companies that have probably the biggest penetration into the most number of people out there are getting some of this really important stuff wrong. And it suggests that, and maybe it's just because we're still learning, how do we put design and user experience into this field? And maybe we're still just learning that, but there's been some big problems there. And where is design for that?
Sure.
Something's not right still.
I don't promise perfection, but I will tell you, and I've got lots of friends working at Google and Facebook. These are places and stories you mentioned I know a fair amount about. I guess there's a couple of responses which say these companies are doing a lot of heavyweight, serious, big things. So while they have a lot of usability people, the question is what percentage of the people are usability people and what level of influence do they have inside the companies? Okay. Now, the Google issues about ethics were not necessarily a usability issue. They were really questions about employee relationships and what employees should be doing. And, these are complicated issues that I don't think we want to get into. I would say Facebook, you've got another case there, which is there are usability issues about how can users control the settings. I mean, Facebook's got 120 privacy settings to check on. And if you've ever dug into it, it's pretty tough to make sense and know what settings you've got. And so there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I would say that issue is not high enough on the totem pole for Facebook. And I'd like to see much better user interface control. I'd like to be able to control my news feed. Facebook lets me make little twiddles on it, maybe block some users or so on, but I think I would like better control. And I've backed away from using Facebook because I just don't like what I'm getting. So there you go. There's one user speaking up. But, I think there's an awareness of that there are problems. And I'd like to see it a lot better at Facebook, and I'd like to see a lot better at Google. I mean, we have, there's a merger here. HCI has become really powerful stuff here. And Shoshana Zuboff's book about surveillance capitalism reveals the much deeper fundamental problems that are happening because these AI algorithms are collecting a lot of data and shaping what we see and what we do and what options are available to us. I'll also put in a plug for Frank Pasquale's book about the new laws of robotics. Pretty good stuff about the problems that are out there and that require legal changes, that deep economic changes, the business models of these companies. And so that gets into a lot more issues that HCI and user interface and HCAI are part of, but the basic business models are what really have to think through.
You talked about the explainability earlier, and I think I'm detecting a trend, which is that I think that more teams are understanding that explainability is ultimately going to win on multiple levels. It's better for the customer, it's better for the business. You see more adoption, even at the cost of precision. Tell me, if I'm a data leader, well, I'm using the Shapley framework and I've got my Shapley explanations for how it worked. Done. Check. Am I done? Like, what did I miss if we used an explainable model. We made sure we didn't use a black box model. So check, we did that. So why do I need this design stuff?
So you said it well before. Explainability is a competitive advantage. That's what people are coming to understand, that people will gravitate towards systems that they understand, that they feel in control of, that are predictable. So the big discussion about explainable AI focuses on what's usually called post hoc explanations. And the Shapley and Lime and other methods are usually tied to the post hoc approach. That is, you use an AI model, you get a result, and you say, what happened? Why was I denied a parole or a mortgage or a job? And at that point, you want to get an explanation. Okay. Now, that idea is appealing, but I'm afraid I haven't seen too many success stories of that working. In fact, when I read that voluminous literature, it's taken me, I've been diving through this for years now, and I've been, especially for the past year, been looking for examples of good user interfaces of post hoc explanations. Took me a long time till I found one. The culture of AI model building would be much bolstered by an infusion of thinking about what the user interface will be for these explanations. And even the DARPA's XAI, Explainable AI, which has 11 projects within it, does not really grapple with this in a good way about designing what it's going to look like. So show it to me. If any of your listeners have great examples, send me an example of screenshots of what an explanation
You mean a post hoc? What a post hoc looks like.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
There is another way. And the strategy is basically prevention. Let's prevent the user from getting confused so that they don't have to request an explanation. We walk them along, let the user walk through the step. This is like Amazon checkout process, 7-step process. And you know what's happening each step. You can go back, you can explore, you can change things in each part of it. It's also what TurboTax does so well in really complicated situations. It walks you through it. And, just what I was looking at this past week about the hospital price estimators, the best ones were ones that walked you through it, that, ask you a series of questions you understood and you got through it. This is really what happened 30 years ago with knowledge-based expert systems and with online help. The old days, it used to be online help and user manuals, 300-page user manuals for user interfaces. They're gone away because we've learned that you don't want to have to teach people what's in a whole user manual. You want to have a comprehensible, predictable, and controllable user interface that makes sense as you walk through each step. And so that's what airline reservation does for you. That's what Amazon checkout does. That's what TurboTax does. And that's what we need to do for AI applications too. Predictable, meaningful application. So, there's a great, series of work just narrowly focused from University of Colorado, Connor Brooks and Daniel Zafir's work. There's 3 or 4 really nice papers about robots, okay? Physical robots. And it turns out, if you show the user of this robot what the robot's going to do, give them a visual picture of what's going to happen, then they know what's going to happen and they say, okay, do it, and then they watch it happen. It's sort of like what's the success story of GPS navigation systems. You say, I want to get from here to there, and then you get a little map which gives you 3 or 4 choices, and you say, okay, that's the one I'll take. And then it gives you the set of directions to do it. So lots of AI in there, but users in control, they understand what's going to happen. And maybe my favorite example is your digital camera. There's lots of AI to set the focus, the shutter, the aperture, and reduce hand jitter, all kinds of things going on. But you're in control. You've got a user interface that lets you see what the picture is going to be. You can zoom where you want to go, and then you get to click the decisive moment when you make that picture. It's your picture. And lots of AI going, but it's under your control. And what you're going to get when the job is done.
Ben, this has been really great to chat with you. Do you have any closing thoughts for people that may be coming more from the data side and kind of curious about this space and they believe in the value here, but they're not maybe sure how to take some steps with this and bringing design and human factors into their work?
The answer is you can do it. So talk to your friends, check it out. I mean, of course, the papers I've got are out there on the University of Maryland Human-Computer Interaction Lab website on human-centered AI. There's 4 or 5 papers that I've done that cover this. And so you can check those out. The one called Bridging the Gap Between Ethics and Practice was the one I mentioned earlier. And I think that's most relevant to your listeners. So that's a good one to go after. But there's a growing movement around this topic. I mean, the Stanford Human-Centered AI Institute has lots of seminars and so on. I'm doing tutorials about it. April 13th, there's a 3-hour tutorial I'm doing at the ACM Conference on Intelligent User Interfaces. And on May 27th at the Human-Computer Interaction Lab, University of Maryland, Annual Symposium, again, a free, open 3-hour tutorial. So that's my contribution to trying to help move the story. But there are lots of other people active in this topic. And this is important. But my message is you can do it. And it will make your products and services better, and you will have a happier success story.
Excellent. If people want to follow you, or are you on Twitter or LinkedIn, or is there a good place?
I'm on Twitter, BenDC, on Twitter, so that's a place to follow me.
Excellent. We'll look that up and link that up in the notes. And when's the book coming out, by the way, the new one?
Yeah, it's cooking away through Oxford University Press, but real books take time, and so it'll happen January 2022.
January 2022. Excellent. We'll look for it.
For the moment, the papers are out there. It's a good start.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your ideas with us.
Thank you, Brian.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Experiencing Data with Brian O'Neill. If you did enjoy it, please consider sharing it with the hashtag #ExperiencingData. To get future podcast updates or to subscribe to Brian's mailing list, where he shares his insights on designing valuable enterprise data products and applications, visit designingforanalytics.com/podcast.